What if one ordinary flight could reveal everything the world still refuses to see? Picture this: you take your seat in first class, just like anyone else. You've earned it through years of hard work, late nights, and quiet endurance. But before the plane even leaves the ground, someone looks at you and decides you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened to Dr. Amara Lewis, a brilliant black CEO who only wanted a quiet flight home. In Seat 1A, she was treated not as a leader, but as a problem, a misunderstanding, a reflection of something deeper: how bias hides behind protocol. But here's the twist: the system that humiliated her was one she secretly owned. And when truth met power, the entire airline and the world watching would never be the same again. If you've ever been questioned for simply existing, if you've ever had to prove your worth in a room that doubted you, this story will speak to your soul. Stay until the end. You'll understand why silence can be powerful and dignity can be revolutionary. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories that remind us all what fairness truly means. The airport smelled of roasted coffee and floor wax, a mixture that always reminded Dr. Amara Lewis of her early engineering days, waiting for connecting flights that would never quite take her home. It was 6:05 a.m. when she reached Gate B14. Her boarding pass glowed softly on her phone. North Star Airlines, Seat 1A, First Class. She wasn't traveling as a CEO today. She was traveling as a woman who wanted silence before Geneva. The keynote waited, her speech on access and equity and global infrastructure still open in her mind. But right now, she just wanted the stillness that sometimes lived above the clouds. "Morning." "Ma'am," the gate agent said, scanning her pass. The machine beeped green. "Enjoy your flight." Simple, smooth, for 5 seconds. Then came the voice behind her, a man's drawl slow, confident, soaked in self-assurance. "Excuse me, is she supposed to be in first?" Amara turned. The man was in a linen suit, early 50s, with that faint smile people wear when they believe the world bends for them. His tag read Elliot Vance. The agent hesitated, looking at the screen again as if the beep might have been wrong. "Yes, sir. She's cleared," the agent said. Elliot chuckled. "I just thought, sometimes these systems mix up seats." Amara didn't respond. She simply adjusted the cuff of her navy blue blazer and walked down the jet bridge. Her suitcase wheels hummed softly over the metal floor, a rhythm steadier than her pulse. Inside the plane, the cabin lights were dim, pale gold against white leather seats. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and perfume. She placed her bag overhead, sat in 1A, and folded her hands. Moments later, the same man entered, taking 1C. He looked at her again, puzzled, as if she were an equation he couldn't solve. "You travel a lot?" he asked. "Enough," she replied. He smiled, waiting for more, but she returned her gaze to the window. The runway lights blinked in even intervals like heartbeat monitors for a sleeping city. A flight attendant approached, older, precise, the kind who believed rules existed to be respected and interpreted through hierarchy. The silver pin on her collar read Ruth Delgado. "Good morning," Ruth said politely. Then she frowned slightly. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass again?" Amara handed her the phone without a word. The attendant scanned it. Beep. Green again. Ruth murmured. "Could you just wait a moment?" Elliot smirked. "Told you." Ruth stepped toward the galley, whispering to a younger attendant. The whispers weren't quiet enough. Amara heard fragments: system error, reconfirm, mismatch. Her throat tightened. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. The old, heavy fatigue of being questioned for existing in a place people think you don't belong. Clara Monroe, the younger attendant, returned with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Ms. Delgado just wants to verify something with the manifest." Amara nodded. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "Please log this interaction under passenger protocol." Clara blinked, uncertain. "Of course," across the aisle. Elliot's grin widened. "No offense," he said softly, "but these seats are for premium members. Not all credit cards open the same doors." You know, Amara turned to him, her eyes calm like deep water. "You're right," she said. "Some doors open from the inside." For a brief second, his smile faltered. The aircraft door closed with a metallic thud. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady, almost indifferent. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard North Star Flight 4017 to Geneva. Estimated flight time, 8 hours, 42 minutes. The engine hum deepened. As the plane pushed back, Amara leaned her head against the seat. Outside, dawn peeled slowly over the horizon, orange melting into silver. Ruth returned, tablet in hand. I'm sorry, Ms. Lewis, could you confirm your ID again? The system flagged your name for additional verification." She looked up, flagged for what Ruth hesitated. "It doesn't specify. Possibly a random check," Elliot muttered. "Or maybe not so random." Amara exhaled through her nose. Calm, controlled. She reached into her bag, withdrew her passport, and handed it over. "Here." Ruth took it, eyes darting between the photo and the woman in front of her. "All right, thank you. We'll handle it." The attendant walked away. Inside, Amara's pulse beat slow but heavy. Not again. The first time had been at a tech conference in Austin. She'd been mistaken for catering staff while preparing to speak on stage. Then, at a private club in Manhattan, security had asked her to wait outside for the doctor's wife. She had learned to meet those moments with silence, not because she was weak, but because silence was the only thing that echoed loud enough to make others hear themselves. The seatbelt sign dinged. The aircraft climbed. Clouds rolled beneath like folded linen. Clara reappeared with warm towels. "Would you like coffee, ma'am?" "Yes, please. Black?" She smiled faintly. "Of course." As Clara left, Amara tapped her smartwatch twice. The screen flashed a secure link. Aurea Systems Network Online. A quiet protocol she had designed years ago for internal audits. She whispered under her breath. "Barely audible flag incident, North Star 417. Bias check request." The command sent, far below, thousands of miles away, at Aurea's headquarters. A young systems analyst named Nathan Cho saw the alert blink on his dashboard. He frowned. "Bias check request from Dr. Lewis." He looked again. The flight number matched one of North Star's premium routes. His gut tightened. He opened the compliance channel. "Sir, we've got a live trigger from the CEO. In flight, back in 1A." Amara sipped her coffee. Bitter, strong, familiar. Elliot glanced at her screen. A tech person. Huh. She nodded once. "Must be nice, flying this way." She met his eyes. "It's work." He chuckled. "Sure, work. I'm in business myself. You ever meet real CEOs up here?" Amara tilted her head, studying him as if considering whether to answer. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "but they usually don't announce it." The engines roared louder as the plane leveled at cruising altitude. Ruth walked past again, her expression unreadable. She avoided Amara's gaze. Outside the window, sunlight scattered across the wing, 1,000 mirrors in motion. Amara thought of Ethan's text before takeoff. "Remember, your calm is your power." She smiled faintly. Power, she thought, isn't about noise. It's about control. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the hum, to her heartbeat, to the quiet conviction rising inside her chest. In the galley, Ruth whispered to Clara, voice sharp. "She's marked as first class, but the system shows a security flag. I can't ignore that." Clara shook her head. "Ruth, maybe it's just a glitch. Maybe," Ruth said, "but protocol is protocol." Clara hesitated. What if it's not the system that's wrong? Ruth said nothing. Back in the cabin, Elliot called out, louder than necessary, "Hey, attendant, when you finish sorting that mess, can we get the menu some of us actually paid for this seat?" Amara didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead, the reflection of clouds flickering in her eyes like slow-moving ghosts. She whispered to herself, "Some lessons. The sky will teach them for me." The scene lingered in stillness, the quiet before the storm. She didn't yet know she had already set in motion, and somewhere far below. The alert she sent kept climbing through corporate firewalls, unlocking doors that would change North Star forever. The first hour passed quietly, the kind of quiet that feels staged. Every sound seemed too neat, the click of a belt, the scrape of metal cutlery, the crisp voice of Ruth Delgado reciting instructions as though she were performing for invisible judges. Dr. Amara Lewis sat still in her navy blue suit, a color that blended into the cabin like deep water under dim light. Her fingers traced the seam of her armrest steady, precise, deliberate. She'd learned long ago that stillness unsettled people who thrived on control. They didn't know what to do with calm. Clara Monroe approached with a linen napkin folded like a petal. "Would you like breakfast, ma'am?" she asked softly. "Yes, thank you," Amara replied, her tone even. Ruth stood a few rows away, speaking to Elliot Vance in a lowered but not so private voice. Amara caught fragments again. Protocol, first-class integrity, passenger verification. Each word landed like a pebble dropped into her patience. Elliot laughed, the kind of laugh that expects agreement. "You know, my company pays top dollar for this experience. Standards are slipping, huh?" Ruth smiled politely, that strained smile of someone who's already chosen a side. "We're doing our best, sir." Amara kept her eyes on the tray in front of her fresh fruit croissant, black coffee, but her mind wandered. Geneva waited. A stage. A room full of executives who would clap for equality while signing contracts that quietly excluded it. She thought of her first promotion at Aria Systems. The board had called her impressive for someone with your background. They said it like praise, but it wasn't. It was a boundary disguised as a compliment. Now she was their founder, their chairwoman, their unseen compass, and she was still being verified. Her smartwatch buzzed lightly. A discreet message blinked across the screen, biased check request acknowledged. In review. Nathan had seen it. He'd know what to do. Across the aisle. Elliot set down his newspaper and leaned toward her. "You work in tech, right?" She looked up slowly. "Yes. What kind?" His tone carried curiosity dipped in condescension. "Systems integration," she said. "Ah," he chuckled. So, like it support my assistance into that sort of thing, Clara, passing by, almost flinched at the remark. Amara didn't. She smiled slightly. Something like that. Ruth appeared again, tension tightening her shoulders. Dr. Lewis. She paused on the title, as though unsure if it fit. We've been instructed to revalidate your seat through corporate verification. It's just procedure. Amara tilted her head. Procedure for whom? For select passengers, ma'am. She nodded once. And what makes me select? Ruth hesitated. The system didn't specify. Then let's make sure it does. Amara said quietly. Please note that this is your second verification request. Document the reason in your log. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of a courtroom order. Ruth's eyes flickered, and for a moment something like embarrassment crossed her face. Of course, Ruth said, before walking away. Elliot muttered, she's one of those corporate watchdog types, always making everything a race issue. Clara's voice cut in, firmer than before. Mr. Vance, please lower your voice. Elliot leaned back, smirking. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. No, Clara said. You're saying what you're used to getting away with. Amara turned slightly, her gaze resting on Clara. The young woman blushed but stood her ground. It was small, but it mattered. The seatbelt sign chimed on light turbulence. The cabin dimmed. Ruth's voice filled the air, calm and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Outside, clouds layered like thick white blankets. Sunlight bleeding through. For a fleeting second, Amara thought of her grandmother, an air traffic controller in the 1970s, one of the first black women to hold that role. She used to say, "The sky doesn't care who you are, baby, but people always will." The plane trembled slightly, coffee rippled in her cup. Elliot cursed softly. When the turbulence eased, Amara's watch pulsed again. A new message, alert North Star, internal query, origin unknown, possible escalation. She smiled faintly. Nathan had pulled the thread, and somewhere inside North Star's network, people were now wondering who could trigger a compliance protocol mid-flight. Ruth returned, forced politeness masking unease. Everything's fine now. Ma'am, just a mix-up. Good, Amara said. Then let's both remember it was only that. Ruth didn't respond. She moved on, her steps faster than before. The meal service ended. Passengers settled into movies or sleep. Elliot scrolled through his phone, half pretending not to look at her. Amara opened her tablet. The draft of her keynote glowed softly. The first line read, "Fairness is not a feature. It's the foundation of every system that lasts." She stared at it for a long while, the words reflecting faintly in her eyes. Clara approached quietly. "Dr. Lewis?" "Yes, I just wanted to say. I'm sorry about before. Ms. Delgado shouldn't have asked twice. We get flagged for all kinds of nonsense." Amara smiled, warm but measured. "It's not your fault. Systems reflect the people who build them." Clara looked confused. "You mean the software? I mean all of it," Amara said softly. "Machines, policies, people, it's all design, and every design reveals who it was meant to serve." Clara nodded slowly, as if hearing something that would stay with her long after this flight. In row 2, a small boy peeked over the seat back. His hair was tousled, his eyes wide. "Hi," he whispered. Amara smiled. "Hi there. My mom says you're brave." She blinked, taken aback. "Did she?" He nodded. "She said it's hard when grown-ups don't play fair." Amara's throat tightened unexpectedly. "Your mom sounds very smart." "She is," he said proudly. "She says skies look different when people are kind." Amara's smile softened. "Tell her she's right." The boy grinned, then ducked back into his seat. The words lingered when people are kind. Simple, true, too rare. She looked out the window again. The clouds thinned, giving way to a streak of blue that stretched forever. It reminded her of the first time she flew alone at 19. On a scholarship ticket she couldn't really afford. She'd promised herself then, one day, she'd make sure skies like this belonged to everyone. And now, here she was, still proving it. Her reflection in the glass was calm, but her thoughts churned quietly. Should I have spoken louder? Should I have demanded more? Or would that have proven them right, that anger is confirmation, not resistance? Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to shout to be heard, Amara. You just have to make sure they can't unhear what follows." She smiled to herself. He was right. He usually was. The cabin lights dimmed again as they crossed the Atlantic. Ruth walked past, slower this time. Her glance carried a trace of something new. Not arrogance, not pity, maybe recognition. Amara nodded once, almost imperceptibly, the smallest peace offering. Ruth hesitated, then whispered, "Would you like a refill, Dr. Lewis?" "Yes," Amara said softly, "and thank you." When Ruth handed her the cup, their fingers brushed. It was a moment too quick for apology, but enough for awareness. 8 hours remained before Geneva, 8 hours before her words would echo in a hall of marble and glass. But for now, she sat in silence, sipping coffee that had cooled just enough to taste like resolve. And, somewhere, buried deep inside North Star's system, a quiet flag kept blinking, patient, persistent, waiting for the storm that was coming. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, the kind that blurs faces and quiets voices. Somewhere between the hum of engines and the steady rhythm of air vents, the world above the clouds felt detached from consequence. Dr. Amara Lewis rested her head against the seat back, but sleep refused to come. Instead, memories moved through her mind like a slow tide. She remembered the conference in Austin, the look on a man's face when she walked on stage, the whisper to his colleague. "She's the keynote." She remembered smiling, not because it didn't hurt, but because she had learned that silence disarms faster than fury. Now, in this cabin of strangers, that same quiet surrounded her again, a test she hadn't asked for. Outside the window, the moon hung low over an endless sea of silver clouds. Every now and then, a faint tremor passed through the fuselage, like the heartbeat of something vast and alive. Clara Monroe passed by, checking seat belts and blankets. Her eyes met Amara's briefly, and for the first time since takeoff, there was no awkwardness, only understanding. Clara had seen enough to know this wasn't about a seat or a ticket. It was about where people believed she didn't belong. Ruth Delgado lingered near the galley, tablet in hand. She scrolled through the manifest again and again, her brow furrowing. The system still showed the same cryptic note beside Amara's name, "Review required. Verification pending." She didn't understand it. It wasn't standard protocol, but she couldn't shake the unease that came with authority. For 30 years, she'd followed the rules, even when they didn't feel right. Maybe that's why she'd stopped noticing when the rules themselves were wrong. Elliot Vance reclined with exaggerated comfort, scrolling through his phone. He raised an eyebrow toward Amara. "So, "Doc," he said, stretching the word with mock familiarity, "you heading to some fancy conference?" She turned to him, voice calm. "Yes. Let me guess diversity something," he said, chuckling. "My company's been forced into that lately. A lot of noise, not much progress." Clara stiffened from a few steps away. Amara didn't. "Progress doesn't happen by accident," she said evenly. "It happens when people stop mistaking comfort for fairness." Elliot blinked, thrown off by her tone. He opened his mouth but closed it again, muttering, "Whatever you say." Silence returned, but not peace. Amara looked out the window again, her reflection ghosting back at her eyes calm, face unreadable. Beneath the surface, her mind raced. The smartwatch on her wrist pulsed faintly. Once every few seconds a heartbeat she could control. She tapped it twice and whispered under her breath, "Activate audit mode." In a quiet office hundreds of miles below, Nathan Cho leaned closer to his screen. The code lines shifted, updating in real time. "Audit mode," he murmured. "She's engaging level 3. He hesitated only a moment before opening the encrypted channel to North Star's internal systems. There it was, the bias flag logged under Passenger 1A, and it wasn't random. Someone had tagged her name manually. Nathan's fingers froze above the keyboard. Oh no. He pulled up the metadata, and there it was. The original access had come from Gate B14 Security Terminal, authorized by Supervisor IDR Delgado, back on the plane. Ruth's hand trembled as she poured coffee for another passenger. Something inside her shifted uneasily, a shadow of guilt she couldn't quite name. She didn't know her name had just been traced. Amara felt the change before she saw it, a different tone in Clara's steps, the way Ruth avoided her row entirely. She'd seen this rhythm before systems unraveling in silence. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Her grandmother's voice echoed from memory baby. "The world will test your patience. Don't let it break your peace." Ethan's words followed, "Your calm isn't surrender, it's strategy." She exhaled slowly, counting heartbeats, across the aisle. Elliot adjusted his seat and waved for attention. "Excuse me, flight attendant, my champagne's warm." Ruth approached, grateful for the distraction. "I'll take care of that immediately." "Sir." He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough. "Maybe you should check on her too," he said, nodding toward Amara, "just making sure she's where she's supposed to be." Ruth's jaw tightened. She wanted to ignore him, but protocol whispered louder. She gave a curt nod and walked toward Amara's seat once more. "Dr. Lewis," she began, keeping her tone polite, "I need to recheck your ticket details." Amara's eyes lifted slowly. "That would make this the third verification. Ms. Delgado." Ruth's throat went dry. "It's standard, is it?" Amara asked, voice soft but cutting. "I'm curious. How many other passengers have been verified 3 times in the last hour?" Ruth hesitated. "I can't disclose that information because there aren't any." "Are there?" Amara said quietly. The older woman's mouth opened, then closed again. "I'm just following protocol." Amara's gaze softened. "That's what everyone says before history remembers what they did." The words weren't angry, but they landed like truth, heavy, unavoidable. Ruth stepped back, shaken. Clara appeared again, pretending to adjust a seatbelt light, her voice barely above a whisper. "For what it's worth, Dr. Lewis, I think you're right." Amara smiled faintly. "Keep thinking that way. It's how change begins." Outside, lightning flickered somewhere distant. silent through the double-pane glass. The sky glowed pale for a heartbeat, then went dark again. Elliot stirred, uneasy. Hope this plane's not flying through a storm. Amara didn't look at him. Sometimes storms are the only way the air clears. For a long moment, no one spoke. The engines hummed, a deep, steady sound like persistence itself. Then, from her wrist, a faint vibration, a message from Nathan. Audit, data secured. Internal escalation initiated. Stay composed. A small smile touched her lips. I am composed, she thought. Always have been. She opened her tablet again, scrolling through her speech. Her finger paused on a line she'd written weeks ago, but hadn't fully believed until now. Power isn't proven by shouting over noise. It's proven by who rewrites the policy once the room goes quiet. She added a note beneath it. Her own reminder. Remember seat 1A. Half an hour later, the cabin lights brightened slightly as breakfast trays were cleared. Ruth's steps were slower now, deliberate. She avoided Amara's eyes, but something had softened in her expression, a trace of awareness. Maybe even regret. Clara collected cups, her smile genuine. We'll be landing in about 6 hours, she said. You'll like Geneva. It's peaceful. Amara looked at her. Peaceful is what people say when they mean controlled. Clara tilted her head, unsure if that was a warning or a philosophy. Amara smiled faintly. I'll see which one it is. She leaned back again, letting her body relax against the leather. The hum of the engines grew softer, rhythmic. For the first time in hours, she felt the slightest sense of quiet, not because the tension had gone, but because she finally understood its pattern. People like Elliot, systems like Ruth's training, institutions like North Star, they all spoke the same language of power, politeness, masking prejudice, rules bending toward comfort. But there was a different kind of language, one written in silence, protocol and data, and she had built it herself, far below. Nathan stared at his screen as notifications multiplied. Executives were pinging, compliance officers joining threads. The message had reached the top, CEO Escalation. Active, he whispered to himself. They still don't know it's her. Back in the cabin. Amara closed her eyes. The hum around her faded until all she could hear was the quiet, steady beat of her heart and the faint buzz of a machine obeying her command. Somewhere, deep inside North Star's network, a door had opened that couldn't be closed, and, above the clouds, the woman in the blue suit slept not peacefully, but with purpose. When dawn began bleeding through the windows, the clouds looked like slow-moving oceans painted gold. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the plane cut through the light, its engines whispering against the wind. Dr. Amara Lewis stirred awake. Her neck ached slightly, but her mind was sharp, too sharp. She had dreamt of silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of people watching injustice and choosing comfort over courage. The first voice she heard was Ruth Delgado's. It carried the same brittle politeness as the night before, but something about it had changed, softer, uncertain. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be serving breakfast shortly. Please remain seated. Amara noticed Clara Monroe nearby, quietly checking on passengers. There was fatigue in the young woman's eyes, but also quiet conviction. Clara's glance met hers, and there was a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement that truth was alive on this plane, even if fragile. Elliot Vance was already awake, complaining into his phone's mic. No, I don't care what the time zone is. Just make sure the Zurich client gets my briefing before we land, and get me a stronger espresso. These people can't even manage that." The words grated against the early light. Amara sipped her water and said nothing. She had learned long ago that power often wears the face of entitlement, but true influence breathes through restraint. A notification pulsed faintly on her smartwatch. Nathan Cho's encrypted message appeared. "North Star internal servers accessed your record. Route trace in progress. Possible connection to bias flag cluster affecting 31 other passengers in the past year." Her stomach tightened. It wasn't just her. It never was. Amara turned her gaze toward the aisle, where Ruth's hand lingered over a passenger list. Every name was a story she didn't know, perhaps dozens who had been questioned, re-verified, made to feel like exceptions. How many of them had simply endured it, thinking it was a small mistake? For Amara, small mistakes built systems. Clara passed by again, lowering her voice. "Dr. Lewis." I looked at the manifest when Ruth wasn't watching. That verification flag someone tagged you before the flight even boarded. Amara's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Before boarding." "Yes," Clara whispered. "It wasn't random. Someone wanted it there." "Thank you," Amara said softly. "That's helpful." The plane trembled slightly, hitting a patch of turbulence. Ruth steadied herself against a seat, her knuckles pale. For a moment, her eyes met Amara's again, an uneasy connection, the kind that happens when both know the truth, but only one is ready to face it. The intercom crackled. "This is your captain speaking. We're expecting mild turbulence for the next 20 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts." Outside, lightning flickered again in the distance, but this time, closer. The light bathed the cabin for half a second, a strobe of truth. As trays clinked and passengers murmured, Amara's smartwatch vibrated again. Audit Escalation approved. Read the message. Legal division requesting confirmation for immediate review. She stared at the words for a moment, then tapped Authorize. At that exact second, a quiet ripple began far below them, servers activating. Compliance monitors lighting up. In offices across 3 time zones, people who had never heard of Amara Lewis were suddenly receiving internal alerts. Bias Protocol 7 triggered. Ruth didn't notice any of this. She was too busy juggling complaints from Elliot, who was now furious about the turbulence. "Do you even know what you're doing up there?" he barked. "If I spill my coffee, I'm reporting this entire crew." Clara's jaw tensed. "Sir, please remain calm." "Calm," he scoffed. "Tell your manager to do her job, and maybe keep your passenger in 1A under control while you're at it." Amara's head turned slowly. "Excuse me." Elliot smiled the way people do when they believe rules protect them. "Just saying, Doc, you've been quite the center of attention. Maybe relax before you make everyone nervous." Clara opened her mouth, but Amara lifted her hand slightly. "It's fine." Her tone was gentle but final. Then, calmly, she reached for her tablet again. She typed a note in her speech draft. "Politeness has never been the antidote to prejudice. It's often its disguise." The turbulence passed, but the tension remained. Ruth approached cautiously. "Dr. Lewis, I just received a system notification. It says your account is under special verification by corporate." Amara met her gaze. "Yes, Ms. Delgado. I authorized it." Ruth blinked. "You did." "I did." Her voice stayed calm, unwavering. "Because if a system can flag me without reason, it can flag anyone." "Wouldn't you agree?" Ruth's lips parted, but no words came. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Clara looked at Amara with quiet awe. "You're not afraid they'll retaliate?" Amara smiled faintly. "I helped design their compliance infrastructure. If they retaliate, they'll have to break their own code." Ruth stared, finally connecting the dots. You're not just some passenger, are you?" Amara's voice was soft, but each word landed with gravity. "No. Ms. Delgado, I'm the majority shareholder of North Star Holdings." The air went still. Even Elliot looked up, his smirk faltering. "Wait," he said, laughing nervously. "You're kidding." Amara didn't answer. She simply turned back to her window, watching the sunrise stretch across the horizon. "I wish I were." The silence that followed was profound, the kind that fills a space when arrogance begins to understand consequence. A chime sounded from Ruth's tablet. She glanced down. Emergency Communication, CEO Lewis verification request. Her breath caught. The younger flight attendants whispered among themselves, unsure if this was a joke or revelation. Clara looked between them, then back at Amara. "Ma'am, is there anything you'd like me to do?" "Yes," Amara said gently. "Keep serving breakfast. People should eat before they realize how much is about to change." For the next hour, the cabin moved in uneasy calm. Elliot stayed silent, shrinking into his seat. Ruth avoided eye contact altogether, and Amara wrote long, careful sentences that would soon become the blueprint of something far larger than an apology. When the captain's voice returned, it carried an unfamiliar caution. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've received direct communication from North Star's executive office. We'll be landing ahead of schedule due to operational review. Please prepare for descent in 45 minutes." Passengers exchanged confused glances. Elliot muttered, "What the hell does that mean?" Amara closed her tablet slowly. Her fingers rested on its cover for a long moment before she whispered, "It means accountability travels faster than people think." Through the window, the sky blazed with color, burnt orange, rose, and silver. Below, Geneva waited, calm and clean like a blank page. Ruth stood frozen near the galley, watching her. "Dr. Lewis," she finally said, her voice small. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." Amara's expression softened. "Knowing isn't always the problem," she said. "It's what we choose not to see that breaks people." Tears welled in the older woman's eyes. "I just followed what the system told me." Amara nodded slowly. "Then help me fix the system." The landing gear lowered with a dull thud. The engines softened. A strange, weightless stillness filled the air, the quiet before transformation. As the plane descended through a veil of clouds, Amara felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She wasn't angry. She was certain. For years, she'd spoken about equity in theory. Now, she was about to write it into policy, into practice, into flight paths themselves. The cabin jolted lightly as the wheels met the runway. Passengers clapped nervously, as people often do when they sense they've been part of something larger without understanding what it was. Amara smiled faintly to herself. "You have no idea," she whispered. Outside, dawn washed the tarmac in pale light. Her phone buzzed again. Nathan's final message before landing, legal team assembled. Board notified. Your call, ma'am. She typed back, "Let them wait. I'll make my statement on site." Then she powered it down and exhaled. The storm was over, but its echo would reshape skies. When the aircraft door opened, The first breath of morning air tasted metallic like rain on steel. Geneva's runway stretched beneath the silver sky. Dr. Amara Lewis waited until the aisle cleared before standing. Her movements were unhurried, her posture perfectly straight. Calm was her armor, but her pulse hummed with something sharper, anticipation wrapped in resolve. Passengers glanced at her while gathering their belongings. Some nodded in quiet apology. Others looked away, embarrassed by their silence earlier. Elliot Vance tried to avoid her eyes, clutching his leather briefcase so tightly his knuckles blanched. Ruth Delgado stood by the galley, trembling hands folded over her uniform clipboard. Clara Monroe lingered near the exit, her young face pale but determined. As Amara stepped out, two men in dark suits waited by the jet bridge. They weren't airport staff. They moved like people accustomed to authority. Dr. Lewis, the taller one, greeted with a polite nod. North Star's board requested your immediate escort to the executive terminal. Ruth's lips parted slightly, disbelief painting her features. Elliot muttered under his breath. Board what board? Amara turned to Clara. Could you join us? Ms. Monroe. Clara blinked. Me, you were present through the incident. Your testimony matters. Ruth hesitated, torn between duty and fear. Amara met her gaze. You should come too, Ms. Delgado. This concerns your crew. They followed in silence down the glass corridor. Outside, sleek cars lined the tarmac black sedans and an unmarked van bearing North Star's insignia. The hum of engines mixed with distant thunder, though the storm had already passed. Inside the terminal conference suite, walls of tinted glass framed the runway. A long table gleamed under cool light. Derek Holt, CEO of North Star Airlines, waited at its head. His tie was loose, his face tight with unease. Around him sat a half-dozen executives and compliance officers, people who usually commanded fear. Now, clearly afraid themselves, Dr. Lewis, Derek began, forcing a smile. The situation came to my attention about 40 minutes ago. I'd like to express. Amara raised a hand slightly. Before you express anything, Mr. Holt, tell me, how long has your verification bias flag been active? He froze. I'm not sure what you mean. 31 passengers flagged for unverified status, all disproportionately people of color, across 12 months. Her voice was calm, precise. I assume your compliance system hasn't alerted you because someone coded an internal bypass. A murmur rippled around the table. Derek glanced nervously at his legal counsel, then at a compliance officer scrolling frantically on a tablet. That can't be accurate. Amara looked at Clara. Would you please recount what you observed? Clara swallowed hard. The system flagged Dr. Lewis before she boarded. I saw it with my own eyes. The reason code said security pattern mismatch. But she was already cleared. I thought it was strange. Ruth clasped her hands tighter. I just followed procedure, she whispered. We're trained to trust the flag. I didn't know it was wrong. Procedure, Amara echoed softly, the word heavy as lead, the most dangerous word in the English language. Nathan Cho entered quietly, placing a folder before her. Audit summary, ma'am. We traced the flag's route to an old predictive model from the pre-merger database. No bias filters applied. Legacy code, legacy bias, Amara murmured. A polite way to say systemic discrimination written in code. Derek rubbed his temples. Dr. Lewis, you have to understand these systems were inherited. I wasn't aware you are the CEO, she interrupted gently. Awareness isn't optional. Accountability isn't delegated. Her voice wasn't raised, yet every word struck with the precision of a gavel. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush. Amara's phone buzzed. A notification flashed, press waiting outside terminal. Multiple recordings from passengers trending online. Elliot's name was already climbing hashtags. A clip of his earlier arrogance played on loop his sneer. His words, "Keep your passenger in 1A under control," captured by another traveler's phone. The internet was already dissecting the scene. Derek looked stricken. "This will destroy us." "No," Amara said softly. "It will reveal you." She opened her tablet, projecting a document onto the glass wall. The screen filled with a company letterhead Emergency Ethics Directive. "Effective immediately," she read. "All discriminatory verification algorithms are suspended. All involved staff placed under review, including management oversight. I'll chair the interim ethics committee myself." Derek's jaw dropped. "You can't, I can," she replied evenly. "As majority shareholder of North Star Holdings, I have executive override authority during any systemic compliance breach. Clause 14B. The room fell silent again. Someone whispered, "She really does own the airline." Clara exhaled softly, tears gathering but unshed. Ruth's eyes glistened too, not out of fear now, but release. "Dr. Lewis, I'm sorry for everything." Amara's expression softened. "Apologies matter only when followed by change." She turned to Derek. "You'll announce the reform at noon. I'll handle the statement." He nodded weakly. "What will you call it?" Her answer was simple. "The Clear Sky Initiative." Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle this time. Cleansing within hours. News anchors around the world picked up the story. Black CEO harassed on flight reveals. She owns the airline. Images flooded screens. Amara standing at the gate, unshaken. Ruth and Clara beside her. Elliot escorted away by security, at home. Ethan Lewis watched the report unfold on television. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "You didn't raise your voice. You raised the standard." By afternoon, Amara stood before a wall of microphones in the same terminal that had once held her humiliation. Now, it was her podium. "Good morning," she began. Her voice, calm but resonant, filled the room. "This morning, I was reminded that prejudice doesn't always scream it, sometimes whispers through systems we trust. But silence can be rewritten." She paused, letting the words breathe. Cameras clicked like rain. "I'm not here to punish," she continued. "I'm here to rebuild, because equality cannot exist in statements alone. It must exist in code, in conduct, in culture. North Star will rebuild all three." Reporters shouted questions, but she raised a hand. "One final note," she said, "to every person who's ever been told they don't belong where they've rightfully earned a seat, keep sitting there. The world needs to get used to it." Applause erupted, quiet at first, then swelling into something vast. Ruth cried openly. Clara smiled through tears. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, Amara stood alone by the glass wall overlooking the runway. The rain had stopped. A small voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, ma'am." It was Aiden Blake, the boy from row 2. His mother stood a few steps behind, hesitant. Amara crouched down to meet his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart." He held out a crumpled drawing, colors smudged from travel. It showed a plane flying through dark clouds into sunlight. "I made this. he said shyly. For you, because you made the sky better. Her heart swelled. She took the paper carefully, as though it were fragile glass. Thank you, Aiden. I'll keep it. He grinned, then whispered, You're like the pilot. Right. Amara smiled. Something like that. As they walked away, she looked once more at the tarmac glistening under sunlight. The storm had ended, but its echo would linger long enough to remind the world calm isn't weakness, it's command. Geneva's skyline shimmered through glass walls as morning light crept across the polished floor of North Star's global headquarters. The building stood like a monument to ambition, sleek, mirrored, unfeeling. Dr. Amara Lewis had walked its corridors before as a silent investor, invisible among men who saw her as a number on a report. Today, she wasn't invisible. Today, her presence bent the air itself. The elevator doors opened onto the executive level. Derek Holt stood waiting outside the boardroom, flanked by 2 legal advisors and the director of communications. His expression was brittle, polite, the kind of smile people wear when control is slipping through their fingers. Dr. Lewis, he began cautiously, the board has convened. They're unsettled by the public attention. I think we should align on language before you address them. Language, she repeated, walking past him. That's usually where injustice begins. He hesitated. I understand your position, but we need to protect the company's reputation. Amara stopped, turning just enough for her gaze to meet his. A company's reputation isn't protected by silence. It's protected by integrity. Inside, the boardroom was already filled 12 directors seated around an oval table of dark oak, each with tablets open to stock graphs and legal memos. The faint hum of tension filled the space. Dr. Lewis greeted Chairwoman Elise Turner, her tone smooth but calculating. We've all seen the footage. While regrettable, it's imperative we contain this narrative before it escalates further. Escalates, Amara repeated, setting her folder down. It already has. What you're seeing is the harvest of neglect. Elise frowned. Our analytics show a 28% drop in public sentiment overnight. The market will recover. Amara interrupted softly. Public trust, however, does not heal with earnings calls. A director across the table, a man with silver hair and an expensive watch, spoke up. With all due respect, Dr. Lewis, you were directly involved. Isn't it a conflict of interest for you to lead the response? Amara's calm didn't waver. It's not a conflict. It's accountability. Murmurs filled the room again. Derek shifted uneasily, half wanting to defend her, half terrified to speak. She continued, her voice steady. Let's make one thing clear. This wasn't about one flight or one crew. This was about an infrastructure built to fail the people it should serve. You've hidden behind efficiency metrics while forgetting the people those numbers represent. Her words cut like light through fog. Elise exhaled. You make it sound deliberate. It is deliberate, Amara said. Neglect is a choice. The silence that followed was taut. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate before ticking again. Nathan Cho entered quietly from the back, carrying a holographic console. He gave Amara a subtle nod. System analysis ready, ma'am. At her cue, the console projected a cascading map of data names, routes, dates glowing blue and red. Each point, Amara explained, represents a passenger flagged for additional verification over the past year. Red means minority ethnicity, Blue means white. The screen was almost entirely red. Gasps fluttered around the table. One director muttered, "Good Lord." "This," Amara said softly, "is not an algorithm's fault. It's ours. Bias doesn't exist in code. It exists in people who write it and in those who ignore its effects." Derek leaned forward. "So what do you propose, a reconstruction?" she said. "Not a press statement. A reprogramming of how we define value. Every department, every metric, every incentive that rewards compliance over conscience must change." Elise narrowed her eyes. "You're asking for a cultural revolution. I'm asking for moral survival." At that moment, a communications officer slipped into the room, whispering urgently into Derek's ear. His face paled. "The press conference from earlier is trending globally," he murmured. 48 million views in 3 hours. Hashtag, she owns the airline. Amara's mouth curved slightly, but it wasn't pride, it was inevitability. Then, it's already begun. The board began debating in low, frantic voices. Words like liability, damage control, and resignation package filled the air like static. Amara let them spiral for a minute before speaking again. "Gentlemen, ladies," she said quietly. The room stilled. "You can spend the next weeks explaining why this isn't your fault, or you can help me make sure it never happens again. Choose carefully. The world is watching." Elise studied her for a long time. "And if we don't cooperate," Amara's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Then North Star becomes a case study instead of an example." The silence that followed was long and final. When the meeting adjourned, Derek followed her to the corridor. "You just dismantled 20 years of corporate comfort in 2 hours," he said. She paused before the elevator. "Comfort is overrated. It's how injustice survives." He looked at her, almost with admiration. "You really mean to rebuild all of this, don't you?" "Yes," she said simply. "And this time, we'll build it to serve everyone." As the elevator doors closed, her reflection merged with the city skyline behind her, one woman, carrying the weight of a system and the will to change it. Downstairs, reporters swarmed the lobby. Through the crowd, she spotted Clara Monroe giving a brief statement, her uniform crisp, her voice steady. "Dr. Lewis showed us something today," Clara said into the microphones. "That decency isn't a job title, it's a choice." Ruth stood nearby, quieter, her hands clasped around a press badge. When Amara passed, their eyes met briefly. No words, just mutual understanding, the beginning of redemption. Outside, the street pulsed with movement. Cars, cameras, voices. It was all noise. Yet, amid that chaos, Amara felt calm. She remembered Ethan's words from a long time ago. The ones he'd said when she first became a CEO, "Change doesn't start with anger. Amara, it starts with endurance." She stepped into her car. Nathan joined her, tablet in hand. "The system's being reset now. You'll get final confirmation by 6, local time." "Good," she said. "And Nathan, ensure every log is public. No secrecy, no edits." He nodded. "Understood," as they drove through Geneva's narrow streets. Amara looked out at the rain-streaked windows. People walked hurriedly, umbrellas bumping, eyes down. For a moment, she thought of all the faces unseen, the lives shaped by quiet biases and systems they never built. The weight of it was immense, but so was her resolve. At a red light, she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Somewhere, across the ocean, a girl might be sitting in a plane seat, wondering if she truly belonged. Amara whispered to herself. She does. She always did. When the car turned toward her hotel, the first notifications began to roll in, pilots thanking her, ground crew sharing messages of pride, passengers recounting their own silent humiliations now voiced aloud. The world was responding, rippling outward like circles on still water. And in that quiet moment, Amara realized something profound. Change wasn't a storm. It was a series of steady breaths that refused to stop. The car stopped in front of her hotel. She stepped out, rain misting against her coat. Tomorrow would bring headlines, board amendments, perhaps lawsuits. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, the sky above the runway was clear. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Geneva washed in silver. Morning traffic hummed softly, and the scent of wet pavement drifted through the air. In the quiet corner of her suite, Dr. Amara Lewis sat by the window, barefoot, a cup of black coffee cooling beside her. The news played on low volume, a blur of headlines, camera flashes, and pundits trying to explain what had already become a global phenomenon. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read North Star Airlines CEO under fire as hidden bias system exposed, majority shareholder steps in. Underneath it, another line scrolled Clear Sky Initiative. She owns the airline. Amara Lewis speaks. Amara muted the TV and exhaled slowly. Her phone buzzed again. Dozens of messages from civil rights groups, politicians, and passengers filled her inbox. But one message stood out. It was from Ethan. Proud of you. But remember, every reform begins with resistance. Protect your peace. She smiled faintly. He always knew what to say, when to say it. At precisely 80 a.m., there was a knock on her door. Nathan Cho entered, holding a digital folder. All divisions have acknowledged the directive. He reported, the ethics task force is assembled, and the flight crew from last night is here, waiting downstairs. Amara set down her coffee. Ruth and Clara. He nodded. Along with the captain, they've requested to speak with you directly. Within minutes, she was in the hotel lobby. The tall glass doors framed a city just waking up, sunlight breaking through clouds like forgiveness after a storm. Ruth Delgado stood there, her uniform pressed but her eyes swollen from tears. Clara Monroe beside her looked equally nervous, though determined. Dr. Lewis, Ruth began softly. Thank you for meeting us. Amara gestured for them to sit. You didn't have to come. Yes, we did, Ruth said quickly. Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. I needed to look you in the eye. What I did yesterday, it wasn't just procedure, it was fear. Fear of stepping out of line. Fear of making the wrong call. I told myself I was following policy, but really, I was hiding behind it. Amara studied her for a long moment. You've been with North Star for how many years? 26? Ruth replied quietly. I've seen everything, good and bad. I thought I knew how the system worked. Turns out I was part of the problem. Clara placed a hand on Ruth's arm gently. She means it, Dr. Lewis. We both do. Amara nodded slowly, then help me fix it. Ruth frowned slightly. How? By teaching others what fear looks like from the inside. Amara said, every flight crew will take part in the new empathy modules. I need people who've lived it, not just those who've studied it. You can't train decency, but you can show what happens when it's absent. Ruth blinked, surprised. You'd trust me with that? Amara smiled faintly. I'd trust anyone brave enough to face their reflection. For a moment, Ruth couldn't speak. Her shoulders relaxed, and tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Clara looked up, hope brightening her expression. "I'll help too. I'll stay as long as you need." Amara placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "I'll hold you to that." Just then, Derek Holt entered, slightly out of breath. "Dr. Lewis," he said, his tone almost deferential now. "The board has approved the reform package. They've scheduled a joint announcement for noon." "Good," Amara replied, standing. "Then let's not waste daylight." Hours later, the same terminal that had once held humiliation now buzzed with anticipation. Reporters filled the viewing gallery, cameras aimed at a sleek podium framed by the North Star insignia. Employees gathered near the back, whispering nervously, unsure what this new era would mean for them. Amara stepped up to the microphone. The hum of chatter faded instantly. "When I boarded North Star Flight 227 last night," she began, her voice steady, "I expected to travel, not to testify. Yet here we are, proof that progress rarely asks for permission." A flicker of camera lights flashed across her face, but she didn't flinch. "I didn't come here to fire people or to shame them. I came to rebuild trust, because systems don't just break, they break people. And when dignity becomes negotiable, everyone loses." She paused, letting the silence breathe. Ruth and Clara stood off to the side, their eyes shining. "Starting today," Amara continued, "North Star will adopt the Clear Sky Initiative. Every passenger verification, every crew evaluation, every AI decision will be subject to human review. Transparency won't be optional, it'll be standard." The crowd stirred, murmuring approval. "And one more thing," she added. "The people who had the courage to confront this issue, not just online, but in person, will lead the change." She turned toward Ruth and Clara. "These women reminded me that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's the whisper that says, 'I can do better.'" Applause rippled through the room. Derek Holt lowered his head slightly, both humbled and relieved. After the conference, Amara stepped outside into the crisp Geneva air. She looked up. The clouds had finally cleared, revealing an endless stretch of blue sky. Clara joined her. "It's strange," she said softly. "Feels like breathing for the first time." Amara smiled. "That's what truth does. It lets everyone breathe again." They walked a few steps in silence before Clara spoke again. "Dr. Lewis, what made you stay calm yesterday? I don't think I could have handled it like you did." Amara considered her answer. "Because calm is power," she said finally. "When they expect you to shatter, silence becomes your weapon. It forces the world to listen." Later that evening, back in her suite, Amara sat once more by the window. The city lights blinked below, a constellation of small victories. Her tablet chimed a message from Nathan. "Audit complete. Bias flag fully removed from all systems. Public dashboard live." She leaned back, closing her eyes. Relief didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhaling after years of holding breath. As the night deepened, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find a hotel clerk holding a package. "For you, ma'am," he said, "delivered by a passenger." Inside was a drawing, the same one little Aidan Blake had given her, the plane breaking through dark clouds into the sun. But now there was something new. 3 figures standing beneath the sky, a woman, a child, and a smaller figure with wings made of light. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were 5 words, "You made the sky safe." Amara held it against her chest, tears welling unbidden. She whispered to herself, "Not yet. Aiden. But we're getting there." Outside, a plane roared overhead, its lights gliding across the night like a promise kept. Somewhere inside that plane, someone was sitting in their rightful seat, unbothered, unseen, free, and that, she thought, was the real victory. The city woke in a hush that only Geneva could hold quiet wealth and quiet conscience, where even the sound of footsteps seemed deliberate. Dr. Amara Lewis walked through the marble corridors of the Palais des Nations, her black heels clicking in rhythm with her heartbeat. The annual Global Ethics in Infrastructure Summit was already underway, and the irony wasn't lost on her. Just 48 hours ago, she'd been humiliated in a first-class seat. Now, she was the keynote speaker everyone waited to hear. Cameras followed her discreetly as she entered the grand hall. Delegates from 50 countries filled the semicircle of seats, murmuring in anticipation. Her name flashed on the central screen, Dr. Amara Lewis, CEO of Aria Systems, majority shareholder, North Star Holdings. The title itself drew a wave of whispers. She paused for a moment, grounding herself, feeling the weight of expectation press against her chest. Then she exhaled, the same way pilots do before takeoff. Elise Turner, the North Star chairwoman, was already seated among the front rows, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. Derek Holt sat 2 chairs away, trying to appear relaxed but failing miserably. They both looked at her with something between pride and apprehension. Amara stepped up to the podium. A spotlight caught her face, the kind of light that exposes everything. "When I was a child," she began, her voice calm but resonant. "My mother used to tell me that dignity isn't something you earn, it's something you're born with. But somewhere between systems and statistics, the world forgot that truth." Her words carried across the hall, gentle yet powerful. 2 days ago, I boarded a flight like any other business traveler. I had a seat 1A, I had a ticket, a purpose, and the same right to fly as anyone else. But systems don't see dignity. They see data, and data, if not cleaned, can poison everything it touches. A hush settled. Even the translators paused for half a second before resuming. "I was flagged for verification," she continued. "Not because of what I carried, but because of who I am. A legacy bias, buried deep in code. Decided I didn't belong in a space my own company helped build." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. Some recognized the story from global headlines. Others were hearing it from her lips for the first time. "But here's what I learned," she said, her tone softening. "Anger alone doesn't dismantle bias. Structure does, accountability does, the courage to act, even quietly, does." She looked toward Derek and Elise, her gaze steady but kind. "North Star will now serve as the first global case study for ethical AI in transportation. We'll publish our audit models, our code, and our corrections. No more secrets. No more silent algorithms deciding human worth." A standing ovation erupted, but Amara raised a hand gently. "Applause isn't the goal," she said. "Replication is." Her next slide appeared a blueprint titled The Clear Sky Framework. It outlined mandatory fairness audits, anonymous bias reporting, and the integration of Aria Systems transparency tools into every major airline willing to partner. "Justice," she said, "isn't just what you feel when wronged. It's what you build so others don't have to." The audience fell silent again, but this time it was reverent, the kind of silence that comes when people realize they're witnessing a turning point. Later, during a coffee intermission, diplomats and executives surrounded her. Some praised, others probed. A European aviation minister leaned in, whispering, "You've just rewritten policy with one speech." Amara smiled faintly. Then it was worth the turbulence. Across the room, Ruth Delgado stood quietly near the back, wearing civilian clothes now. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she'd flown to Geneva on her own dime just to watch. Clara Monroe had come too, standing beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. When Amara spotted them, she excused herself and crossed the room. "You two again," she said, warmth softening her usual composure. Ruth lowered her eyes. "Couldn't miss history." "Ma'am, neither could I," Clara added. It felt personal. Amara chuckled softly. "It is, for all of us." Elise approached then, her expression thawed for the first time. "Dr. Lewis," she said, "the board just voted unanimously to make the Clear Sky Initiative permanent. I'll personally oversee its expansion." "That's good to hear," Amara replied, her tone even. Elise hesitated, then said quietly, "You were right. Neglect is a choice. Thank you for forcing us to see it." Amara gave a small nod. "Then let's choose better every day." When the summit ended, Amara returned to her hotel, exhaustion sinking into her bones. She hadn't eaten in hours. Geneva, outside, was bathed in amber light, the lake glimmering beneath the last streaks of sunset. She poured herself a glass of water, kicked off her shoes, and opened her laptop. Messages had flooded her inbox. Pilots, engineers, data scientists all writing to thank her. But one caught her eye. From Aiden, BO8, Family Mail, calm. It was short. "Hi, Dr. Lewis. My mom showed me the news. You made everyone safe now. I told my class about you. We all want to be like you when we grow up." "Aiden." Her throat tightened. She read the message twice, then whispered, "You already are, little one." At that same moment, Nathan sent her a notification, "System-wide protocol update effective 0600 UTC tomorrow. Global verification code, lock released. Clear sky bulletin, ready for your signature." She stared at the message for a long moment, the magnitude of it sinking in. One signature, and millions of passengers across continents would travel without silent prejudice woven into the lines of unseen code. Amara stood, stretching slightly, then walked toward the window. The moon had risen above the lake, soft and unassuming. She whispered to herself, "For every person who's ever been questioned for simply existing, this is for you." In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself no longer just a CEO or reformer, but a woman carrying both the wounds and the will of countless others. She smiled faintly, then turned back to her desk. At exactly midnight, she opened the digital form labeled Clear Sky Policy Final Authorization. Her hand hovered over the screen for a moment, trembling slightly. Then, with a single touch, she signed it. Instantly, the system responded, "Policy activated. Global compliance sync scheduled at Zoasinsaoiro." For a moment, she simply stood there in silence. The weight she'd carried for years, the constant need to prove, to endure, to outthink bias lifted slightly, like fog dissolving after dawn. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She just breathed, deeply, steadily. Outside, The faint hum of departing planes filled the night. Somewhere. She imagined a young black woman boarding a first-class seat, calm, unchallenged, unseen, not because she was invisible, but because she finally belonged. And, with that image, Amara turned off the lights, leaving the city glowing beneath her like a promise kept. The next morning, the world woke to headlines that spread faster than dawn. Clear sky policy goes global. The woman who changed the skies. The article showed a photo of Dr. Amara Lewis standing at the Geneva podium, her hand raised mid-speech, eyes steady, a single line beneath it. She turned humiliation into reform. But while the world celebrated, Amara remained quiet. She never cared for fame. She cared for follow-through. Her return flight to New York was scheduled for noon. Geneva's airport gleamed under soft light, efficient as a heartbeat. As she passed through security, passengers glanced at her with recognition. Some whispered. Others simply smiled. There was no paparazzi, no chaos, just a current of respect that followed her like a silent escort. At the gate, a tall man in a Navy pilot uniform stepped forward. His badge read Captain Elias Ward. "Dr. Lewis," he said, offering a firm handshake. "It's an honor to have you aboard. We'll make sure this flight is smooth." Amara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Captain. Smooth is good, predictable is better." He chuckled softly. "After what you did, ma'am, predictable might finally become the standard." Once aboard, she walked past first class, noticing every small detail, the tone of voice of the crew, the way attendants greeted passengers equally, the subtle shift in posture when she entered. Change had a scent, she thought, clean, quiet, and real. Seat 1A awaited her again. The same seat that once carried humiliation now felt like redemption. A small card lay on her tray table. "Welcome home, Dr. Lewis. Your courage lifted us all." It was unsigned. She smiled. Sometimes gratitude needed no author. As the plane ascended, clouds rolled beneath them like endless linen. Amara opened her laptop, reviewing early reports from the Clear Sky rollout. Data from 10 countries already confirmed bias flag rates had dropped to near zero overnight. Her vision, once dismissed as idealistic, was now measurable reality. Halfway through the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. If you look to your left, you'll see the French coastline fading beneath us, and to our right, the beginning of a better standard in air travel. On behalf of every airline professional, we thank Dr. Lewis for reminding us that respect isn't a protocol. It's a promise." The cabin erupted in applause. Some passengers craned their necks to glimpse her. Amara simply lowered her eyes, humbled. A flight attendant approached quietly, a young woman with soft brown curls and an unmistakably nervous smile. "Dr. Lewis," she said, I was one of Jessica Reed's trainees at Star Air before it all changed. I left because I couldn't stay silent anymore. Today's my first day back in uniform. Thank you for giving me that chance." Amara's expression warmed. "You gave yourself that chance. You walked back through the door." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "Still, you held it open." Moments like that meant more than applause. They were proof that the world was shifting, one conscience at a time. As lunch service began, Amara declined her meal, opting for tea instead. Peppermint, as always. The same scent that had followed her since that flight, the one that changed everything. She held the warm cup between her hands, thinking of Aiden's message, of Ruth and Clara sitting quietly in the audience, of Ethan waiting at home with that knowing smile that said, "You did it, even if you'll never say it out loud." Her phone buzzed once. A secure message from Nathan appeared. Phase 2 confirmed. FAA and EASA have adopted Clear Sky as global baseline, effective immediately. Amara leaned back in her seat, eyes closed. The rhythm of the engines lulled her into a rare calm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running against gravity. She was simply flying. But peace never lasted long for people who built revolutions. An announcement broke the quiet. "If there's a Dr. Lewis on board, please ring your call button. We have a minor technical situation that requires verification." Her eyes opened sharply. The tone was calm. Professional, but the phrasing triggered an ache of déjà vu. She pressed the button. Moments later, Captain Ward himself appeared at her seat, visibly uneasy. "Dr. Lewis, I'm so sorry," he said quickly. "It's not what it sounds like. Our system's verification protocol glitched mid-flight. It's requesting your credentials as part of the new AI sync. We believe it's a test signal from the Clear Sky rollout. Ironically, it's asking to confirm you." Amara blinked, then laughed softly. "So, the system's testing me on my own work." He nodded, half embarrassed. "Yes, ma'am. The irony's not lost on us. Let it run," she said calmly. "If the system's behaving autonomously, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, question authority equally." Ward exhaled, visibly relieved. "You're extraordinary, Dr. Lewis. Most people would have been furious." "I don't need fury anymore," she replied. "I have function." Minutes later, the cockpit confirmed the verification complete. The protocol had indeed been a random check one that validated both her ID and the system's independence. It was poetic. Really, the very code born from her pain now proving its impartiality. When they landed at JFK, the tarmac sparkled under the noon sun. As passengers disembarked, the air smelled of jet fuel and fresh beginnings. Cameras again. But this time they weren't hunting scandal. They were recording change. A journalist asked, "Dr. Lewis, do you feel vindicated?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Vindication suggests I wanted revenge," she said. "I only wanted fairness. We all deserve that." Ethan waited near the terminal exit, hands in pockets, eyes soft with pride. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile. "You grounded a prejudice and lifted an entire industry. Not bad for a week's work." She chuckled. "Let's just say turbulence has its uses." They drove home through Manhattan, the city pulsing with its usual rhythm. Billboards flashed her image now, not glamorous, but purposeful. "Fly equal, fly clear sky." Ethan reached over, squeezing her hand gently. "Do you realize," he said, "that people will quote you for decades?" Amara shook her head. "They'll forget my name soon enough. What matters is that they'll remember the standard." That night, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the skyline, she reflected on how far she'd come from that humiliating flight to this quiet revolution. A gentle wind carried the city's hum upward, wrapping her in a kind of stillness she'd never known. Her phone vibrated once more, a message from Ruth. "Just wanted to say thank you. I'm back in training now, teaching new hires under the Clear Sky Code. Every day, I make sure they see what I once missed." Amara typed back. "Then the sky's in good hands." As she put her phone down, a soft knock came from behind. Ethan stood at the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Peppermint?" he asked. She smiled. "Always." They sat together in silence, watching the lights of planes flicker across the horizon, small, distant, but steady. Somewhere out there, countless travelers moved freely, unaware of the invisible work that made their peace possible. Ethan broke the quiet. "Do you ever think about that flight anymore every day?" she admitted, but not with pain, with perspective. "And what do you see now?" She looked at him, eyes reflecting the city's glow. "I see proof that dignity, once defended, doesn't just protect one person, it protects everyone after." He nodded, and they sat for a long time without speaking. Two silhouettes against a skyline that finally seemed to breathe easier. The world outside kept moving, planes taking off, headlines shifting, but inside, the air was calm. And for once, Amara Lewis allowed herself the simplest luxury of all: peace earned, not granted. 6 months later, spring returned to New York. The city's skyline shimmered under soft April rain, streets reflecting the glow of headlights like veins of gold. In a quiet corner office overlooking the Hudson, Dr. Amara Lewis sat by the window, watching planes trace silver lines through a gray morning. The Clear Sky Initiative had grown beyond her wildest hopes. 47 airlines, 23 regulators, and nearly 1,000 aviation professionals had adopted its framework. What began as humiliation in a seat labeled 1A had become an international movement. But even progress left its ghosts. Some mornings, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel that moment, the steward's tone, the suspicion in his eyes, the cold pause of judgment. Yet now, that memory no longer felt like a wound. It felt like origin, the moment her quiet power had awakened. Ethan entered the room carrying 2 mugs, peppermint tea again, its scent filling the air like ritual. "You've been staring at the window for half an hour," he said gently. Amara smiled, just thinking how strange it is that the sky looks exactly the same, no matter who owns the airline. He sat beside her. "That's the point, isn't it? You made the sky belong to everyone again." Her tablet pinged softly. A message from Nathan Passenger's satisfaction ratings just hit record highs. Bias incidents down 98%. FAA requests your presence for a new oversight board. Ethan leaned over, reading the message. "You're not going to say yes, are you?" Amara smirked. "You know me too well. Because you don't like sitting in boardrooms because I've done enough talking," she replied. "Now it's time to build successors." She set the tablet down and turned her gaze back to the skyline. Across the river, a new training center stood proudly, the Lewis Institute for Ethical Systems. Hundreds of new recruits were learning to code, not just with logic, but with empathy. Clara Monroe was leading cultural modules there. Ruth Delgado was designing new cabin empathy simulations. Both women had turned shame into service. That afternoon, Amara visited the Institute. The air inside smelled faintly of jet fuel and coffee, a strange but fitting blend. Students gathered in a circle around her, bright-eyed and eager. A young woman raised her hand. "Dr. Lewis," she asked shyly, "what made you keep calm that day on the plane? I think I would have screamed." Amara smiled. "Maybe I wanted to. But if I had, they would have seen a stereotype, not a person. Calm isn't weakness. It's control. And control gives you the power to rewrite the ending." A hush fell over the room. Another student asked, "Do you ever regret not walking away from the industry?" She thought for a long moment. Every system that excludes us needs someone inside it to reprogram it. You can't rebuild what you abandon. Applause rose, soft but heartfelt. Before leaving, she stopped by the memorial wall near the entrance. It wasn't grand, just a steel plaque with one engraved sentence: all seats earned, all faces welcome. She touched the words lightly, remembering the boy who'd inspired them. Aiden's letter had arrived again a week ago, written in shaky cursive. Dear Dr. Lewis, I'm flying again soon. My mom says every plane is safe now because of you. I'm not scared anymore. Later that week, Amara boarded a short flight to Washington for a speaking engagement. This time, the flight attendants greeted her not as a celebrity, but as part of something shared. Good afternoon. Dr. Lewis, one of them said, we're honored to have you with us. She smiled. You're part of the reason I'm here. During the flight, she opened her notebook, a habit she'd kept since childhood, and began sketching a new framework, Phase 3 ethical automation in public transit. The world wasn't done evolving, and neither was she. As she worked, Captain Elias Ward's voice came over the speakers again. Coincidence, perhaps, but comforting. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. The weather is clear above us. Clear skies, as always. Passengers chuckled softly. The phrase had become a global slogan now, appearing on uniforms, safety cards, even coffee cups. Amara leaned back, closing her eyes. The hum of the engines felt like a lullaby, a reminder that peace, once fought for, must be maintained. When the plane landed, reporters waited outside, hoping for a quote. One shouted, Dr. Lewis, what's next for you? Politics United Nations. She paused at the top of the terminal steps, rain catching in her hair. What's next? She repeated softly, teaching people to look each other in the eye again. That night, she spoke at the Kennedy Center. The hall was packed, lights dimmed, air heavy with expectation. Her voice, calm and deliberate, carried across the silence. We talk about the sky as something above us, but the truth is, it reflects us. When bias clouds our systems, we darken our own horizon. But when we choose fairness, even quietly, the whole world flies smoother. A standing ovation thundered through the hall, yet, as always, she didn't bask in it. She stepped back, almost embarrassed by the adoration. For Amara, the applause wasn't the measure, the change was. After the event, Ethan joined her backstage, his tie slightly loosened. Do you ever get tired of being a symbol? He teased. She laughed. Every day, but symbols don't rest until the story's complete. Then, what's the ending? Amara looked toward the stage curtain, where echoes of clapping still lingered. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe justice isn't a final scene. Maybe it's a rhythm, something you keep alive every time you choose dignity over convenience. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of renewal. They walked together toward the car, and for a moment, Amara looked up. A plane crossed the moonlit sky, lights blinking steadily. Funny, Ethan said. Even after all these years, you still watch every plane? I'm not watching the planes, she replied softly. I'm watching the proof. He smiled, understanding. The next morning, at sunrise, she returned to North Star headquarters one last time. The boardroom was different now, diverse, vibrant, alive. Elise Turner greeted her with genuine warmth. We voted this morning, Elise said. Your reforms are permanent. The Lewis Clause has been added to every partnership contract. No reversal clause allowed. Amara nodded. Then it's yours to keep alive. As she turned to leave, Derek Holt stopped her at the door. "Dr. Lewis," he said, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." She gave him a gentle smile. Seeing now is what matters. Outside, reporters were already waiting again, but she waved them off with a polite nod. Her car waited by the curb, engine idling softly. Before getting in, she paused to take one last look at the North Star logo gleaming above the glass doors. For the first time, she felt no distance between the brand and its promise. At home that evening, Amara poured herself a final cup of tea. Peppermint again, always peppermint. She stood by the window, the city glowing below, and whispered to no one in particular, "We did it, not as triumph, not as closure, but as truth." Somewhere far above, another flight soared into the clouds. A child pointed through the window, asking his mother, "Mom, who made the sky safe?" And the mother smiled softly, saying, "A woman who remembered that the sky belongs to everyone." Amara didn't need to hear it to know. The world had changed, not through spectacle, but through steadiness, and the sky, once a mirror of prejudice, was now, finally, a mirror of fairness. As the night deepened, she placed her mug down, drew the curtains, and let peace settle like a quiet landing. For the first time in a long time, she didn't think about turbulence or protocols or policy. She just thought of stillness. And somewhere in that silence, the sky remembered her name not because it needed to, but because it finally understood why she'd fought to make it clear. This story isn't just about one woman. It's about every person who's ever faced quiet injustice and chosen strength over rage. Dr. Amara Lewis reminds us that dignity is not granted by titles, nor taken by prejudice. It lives in the calm moments when we decide not to mirror cruelty, but to transform it. Her choice to turn humiliation into reform teaches us something vital. Anger can expose a problem, but wisdom solves it. We all hold power, some through words, others through action. What matters is how we use it. In life, there will always be moments when we're misunderstood or underestimated. The lesson is to stay centered, to let integrity, not emotion, speak first. True justice isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring no one else suffers the same wound. So, when faced with unfairness, ask yourself not, "Why me?" but, "What can I make better because of this?" That's how real change begins. Thank you for watching and feeling this story with us. If Amara's journey moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps more people hear stories that honor strength, compassion, and justice. Together, we can keep spreading voices that remind the world respect should never be optional. Stay kind, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next story.